The other three cable news channels were abuzz this morning with the news that a Russian court had sentenced WNBA star Brittney Griner to 9 years in a penal colony after finding her guilty of smuggling what Russian prosecutors claimed was a large amount of cannabis oil into the country. She's been in detention there since February when airport officials in Moscow found 2/100ths of an ounce of the oil in vape cartridges she was carrying in her luggage. Now, the cablers were all treating it with far more seriousness than I would have. After all, this isn't a real sentence for the crime. This is a political decision. They claim the maximum sentence is 10 years, and she gets just below the maximum to make it seem like there was real deliberation that went into the decision, rather than the reality that this had been preordained by Putin or one of his senior officials. The Russian government clearly wants to milk whatever leverage they can from the detention of Griner, who at this point is the most high-profile American political prisoner. She's a bargaining chip. Now, it's true, her sentencing came after she pled guilty to the charge, but of course, she didn't really have a choice. Russia's not a country where the courts are known for being just, particularly in a political case like this one. She was going to be found guilty no matter what, and the Russians demand an admission of guilt before any prisoner exchange can be conducted. Here's Griner speaking after the verdict.
I made an honest mistake, and I hope that in your ruling that it doesn't end my life here. But I had no intent on breaking any Russian laws. I had no intent, I did not conspire or plan to commit this crime. I want to apologize to my teammates and the organization, Gimka, for any damage that I may have done to them. I never intended on hurting them. This is my second home, and all I want to do is just win championships and make them proud.
Now, there's talk of a prisoner exchange between Russia and the U.S. for a Russian arms dealer the U.S. is imprisoned on charges that included conspiring to kill Americans. That man, Victor Bout, has served just over 10 years of a 25-year prison term. Russia has campaigned heavily to have Bout freed. The United States reportedly proposed in June to exchange Bout for Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan, who's been in Russian custody for nearly 4 years on charges of spying, which he and his family deny. Now, I'm not saying Griner didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying she didn't technically break Russian law. I am saying the sentence is a political one, not some reasoned legal judgment. Griner's Russian attorneys talked about the sentence outside of court today.
Would you say the verdict is strict compared to similar cases in Russia?
Yeah, much stricter.
Much stricter.
10 years is maximum.
What's the usual kind of average that people get for similar or less or some kind of heavier crimes?
The average is 5 years or around 5 years, and almost a third of the people convicted get the parole.
Joining me now is former federal prosecutor Katie Cherkasky, who thinks Griner should have known the law in Russia and that she's put the U.S. in a tough spot. Katie, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. So do you think, let me first just ask you, in terms of my analysis here, do you think I'm getting something wrong here?
I think you're being very fair to the extent that this is very political, and this couldn't have been a worse time, obviously, for Brittney Griner to enter Russia with marijuana or with cannabis of any sort. Obviously, that's against the law there, and it's difficult to not have sympathy for Brittney Griner regardless, but the question is, how much sympathy do we have? Do we trade terrorists that we've captured in exchange for her release? Do we prioritize this case over the cases of many other Americans who are detained overseas that the United States cannot get out, to include service members? And I think that the media focus on this case is interesting in a lot of those respects, not because it's not sympathetic, not because it's not a political decision, which obviously it is, but because it highlights how little power the United States, the State Department, or even the White House have when Americans go overseas and are then bound by the laws of those countries and are put through their justice systems.
But isn't it particular to Russia, though, that obviously the relationship with Russia is so bad right now that there's very little wiggle room, although we did recently see an exchange that I think surprised many, which shows that there is still some level of a back door. But it doesn't seem entirely fair to me to compare Russia to every other country around the world right now. It seems that our options when it comes to Russia right now are pretty limited, no?
Well, certainly that's a huge consideration in this case. But there is right now in many news coverage that there's a lieutenant from the United States Navy who's imprisoned in Japan for an incident that happened while he was having a medical incident. And that's a person who was sent to serve overseas by the United States military. And the U.S. cannot do anything to get him out of confinement there.
Is that the guy who crashed into the guy who was in the car who got 3 years?
Right, exactly.
Right, okay, yeah.
And so this is just another example of when Americans are overseas, even involuntarily as service members, where they're living there at the behest of the United States government. The United States has such little power to negotiate, even with our own allies, let alone with a country who's declared America their #1 enemy. So certainly this is a very bad time for this sort of diplomacy to take place. But that's really the only option that exists here in terms of getting her out of this sentence earlier.
Totally agree. It sounds to me like you think, though, the media coverage is the part where you think there's been a little bit too much focus on this. Is that fair to say?
I think that we're forgetting that marijuana is federally illegal in the United States. And even in the United States here, there are American citizens who are sent to prison every single day, notably many service members in the United States, who for small amounts of marijuana possession themselves. So the idea of the crime that Brittney Griner committed, I don't think is the dispute so much as the length of the sentence.
Correct.
And certainly they have a dispute about what that's worth. In the United States, under federal law, currently possession of marijuana can earn you up to a year of confinement here. In Russia, they're saying it's up to 10 years. That's their justice system. We obviously have no control over that.
But I guess that's my question. Do you take their justice system seriously? Because I don't. I guess maybe that's the difference. I don't take their justice system seriously. I don't think a judge independently made this ruling. Do you?
Well, I absolutely believe that America has the fairest justice system in the world. I was a prosecutor. I'm a criminal defense attorney here. I believe that we give people rights that you're not going to get overseas in these other systems. I mean, it's the sad reality, the grim reality of this is that when you are in another country, you really are subject to their laws, and there's no special phone call that anybody can make up to and including the president that guarantees that you'll be released early. Now, in this case, the United States did take the extent of declaring Brittney Griner unlawfully detained, which does open up under the law more avenues for negotiation to include prisoner exchange. But that's really the highest level that we can get to when we have Americans who are detained in overseas criminal justice systems. And that's really the sad truth of this, whether they're a public figure or whether they're a service member or otherwise. So certainly, I don't know that I take it seriously. I know for a fact that the United States justice system gives far more rights to those.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
And unfortunately, that just doesn't apply in Russia.
Yep. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.